winning for black.
I'm out.
How does Magnus
Man,
Carlsen
I'm
do
done.
this?
I'm out.
So that was James Canty's reaction when he saw the mother of all swindles tonight in the Pro Chess League match between the Canada Chess Bras and the Charlotte Cobras. Now this game's from the final round. Big game because it had a big bearing on the match. So I'll reveal the match score at the end of this video, but first let's jump into this one. Carlsen with black, and he was playing against Awonder Liang, an exceptional youngster from the US. So we had e4 on the board. Carlsen now goes for a French defence, and after white takes the centre, he strikes back, and we see knight c3, the most main move played, and it invites bishop b4 as I'm drawing there, which is the winnower variation. But Carlsen goes knight f6, the classical variation, not quite as sharp and tactical, and now white can advance here immediately, but instead we see bishop g5, and the pawn now takes on e4 because of that pressure against the knight. The knight recaptures, this one develops, defends the other, and now we see takes with check, the knight recaptures, this one continues developing, and Magnus now strikes at the centre, the classic French move. Pawn c3 defends, a6 takes away b5 from the bishop, maybe a b5 expansion on the cards later as well. And now bishop d3 develops, and we see Carlsen take on d4, and the knight now recaptures. If you go with the pawn, well, you've got an isolated queen's pawn, and also you run into bishop b4 check, which is a bit annoying. So the knight captures here, now h6 puts a question, the bishop drops back, Magnus develops like this, he puts pressure on the knight, but white ignores it and castles the king. Very standard tactic. If you capture and try and win a pawn, then you run into this check and you win the queen on the next move. So coming back here, black just castles as well, and now the knight steps away, it puts pressure on that bishop, Magnus drops back, and both players now activate their queens, prepare to bring the rooks into the game. So the white bishop steps back, eyes the queen, this one defends, and now the rook comes to the centre, Magnus chops off here, the h-pawn recaptures, always recapture towards the centre they say, unless you have good reason not to, and now e5, a very thematic idea, opening up the development of that light squared bishop, and although you create a target for white to start attacking, it can be easily enough defended, and you've activated the bishop when you push the pawn. Now I'm highlighting that knight on b3 because again this is instructive. Where is that knight jumping to? It's got no forward jumps when you look at these squares. So knight d2 is now played. There's a common chess positional idea of improve your worst piece, and that was white's worst piece in the position. So it's swinging around, it's now got a number of jumps that it can look at from here. Bishop g4. Now this is kind of deep stuff. You provoke this move, you lose time because the bishop now drops back, but this is the piece I was just drawing. You open up a line towards the king, and that can create tactical ideas. And after knight e4, in fact, sorry, white plays knight e4 here. After this move of f3 is played and the bishop drops back, we see the tactical ideas straight away. Because if white takes the pawn, which is playable, well then you can check using that newly created weakness. King goes or queen blocks, and then you can take here. And you've now shattered the pawn structure. These other pawns could now become weak as well. So instead, we see knight e4 played. The pawn is ignored. Now queen b6 check anyway. And just running back one move, sorry, this is kind of a key moment because Magnus goes a bit wrong. Maybe checking wasn't his best. For example, he can take here. Queen captures, looks scary, but you can go g6. And again, if white takes this pawn, well, black's got queen b6 check ideas, taking here. Should be roughly level. White a bit better, but not so much in it. But Magnus checks, the king goes, and then he takes this pawn. And his whole play now is very risky because he's sidelining his pieces and white is going for the king. And potentially it's this brilliant next move that Magnus missed. So white goes pawn to b3, an exceptional idea which we'll see the point of after bishop takes, which was played in the game. Now if you take with the queen, just to show you this one, the problem once again is you're sidelining your pieces. So you can take here with check, shatter the pawn structure. I mean already this looks miserable. But then there's these really nice attacking ideas. Now queen e4 is good, but bishop f5 is even stronger, a really deep idea. But you cover e6 from the queen's retreat. It also can't come here because the rook covers, and if it steps anywhere, well, the bishop drops, and the bishop can't retreat because the queen's in the way. Well, what if you come here, try and provoke an exchange, move the bishop here or whatever? Well, then there's queen d2. You sidestep, you hit this pawn, king g7, right? But then rook e4. Double attack, or double threat rather. You hit here and g4, the king's getting cut to shreds. You know, the whole thing's awful. So many attacking ideas. So this is why Magnus doesn't take with the queen. He goes with the bishop. He leaves the queen looking at this one, but actually it's no good, because after the rook comes to b1, hitting this bishop, there's now a threat to trap it in one way or another. You know, you could retreat the knight, all sorts of things, bring with the queen. So a5 is forced to then defend the bishop with a4, but now we see takes with check. And you'd love to recapture with the queen, but you can't. Then you drop your bishop. So the pawn has to take. How miserable is this? Queen e4. And now Magnus plays a bad move here. It goes from about +2 for white to +5.5. So his best here was either a4 or king f8 immediately, preempting the check. He goes with this rook here. But now after check, king f8, that rook move just hasn't helped his position, because we see another check. Now the king keeps running, by the way. If it steps back, then you're getting boxed in here. The bishop comes with check. The king is forced to the corner. Check. King goes and rook e4. And again, you lift the third piece into the attack. It's too much for black to cope with. So coming back here, Magnus gets on his running shoes. And now this is really the star move of the attack. Can you find the best move for white in this position here? So the move to play to break through the defenses is rook takes e5 check. Really nice idea of using this pin, because if the rook is captured, you lose your queen. So the rook was not captured. Instead, we see the king step to d7 here. Now, just to show you, if it steps to d6, well, now the pawn's not defended by the queen. That's no good. And if it steps back to here, well, there's different good moves, but this is one sample line. You can take with check, then check down here. Now if you want to stay with the rook, the king has to come to d7, but then there's bishop f5 check, and there's just everything going wrong for black. You know, there's pins down here if this bishop blocks. This is skewered, of course. Okay, it's like +15, so we won't go too much deeper. But coming back to the game, king d7 played. Now there's bishop b5 check. This rook defends it, of course. Another skewer here. And now the king goes to c7. We see rook takes on e8, and Magnus finds the best move. If you recapture that rook, which looks the natural one, well then the bishop takes back, and when you do the material count here, white is actually a whole rook up. So what Magnus does is correct. He takes this bishop, because at least now he's just an exchange down. Have I counted that right? Yeah, just the exchange. But here we see white not playing in the most precise way. So the rooks get chopped off, but actually you'd have been better to check. The king moves away, and then you can keep the rooks on the board and keep the attack raging on. I mean, look at that king just wandering around the center. But what we see in the game is the rook takes. Now after the king takes back, we see check, king goes, and the queen takes here with check. And this whole sequence of play also makes a lot of sense, because it looked like a forced win. Because after the bishop captures, you then take the queen here, and this should be a one endgame. You've got an extra pawn as white, and you've got rook against bishop. Surely hopeless. Well, a4 now on the board, but it's surprisingly difficult now. So rook b4 seems to have been the best move here when you run this with the engine, because if black carries on running the pawn, then you can come behind. If a2, then there's c4 blocking out the bishop. You're going to have an exchange here, and this should be an easier position to win. But if we come back here, we didn't see rook b4, we see rook a5. Makes so much sense becoming behind the pawn. But after bishop b3 covering, the problem is you can't actually keep this rook on the a file. So g4 played. White, of course, looks to get these ones going, create a passed pawn. b6 kicks the rook, we see check, the king goes, and after f4, now b5, gives the king room to attack that white rook. g5 played, the pawn captured, this one takes back, And after king b6, just jumping back a move. I'm highlighting that bishop, by the way, because look at how well placed it is. It not only helps the a pawn advancing, but also stops the g pawn running for the moment. So king b6, the rook goes away, and after king b7, well, the best white's actually got here is to take a draw. And you could do so by bringing the rook back here, the king attacks, the rook goes, etc. You could get this kind of repetition. But what we see in the game is the rook going away. And of course white plays for this. You know, it still looks like white should be winning. But now a3, g6, a2, the rook has to come, stop the pawn making a queen. And now king c6 marches in, g7, bishop g8, king g3, and after king d5 from Magnus, here white goes wrong. So actually the way to go to draw the game is with king to f2. I mean, there are a couple of other moves, but this is the basic idea. Because after the king marches in, then you can go rook c1, defend this pawn, and if the king keeps coming, then the white king comes, black king comes, white king comes. So you just defend this one in time. Although black can make a queen, you capture, king takes back, and you can march your king around to win this pawn. Although there's a check, it's unstoppable for white to pick up the pawn, because when you get to this position, you can go king c5, yes, black takes, but then you decoy the bishop, you pick up the pawn, that's a drawn game. But coming all the way back here after king d5, we don't see king f2, bringing the king over here. Instead, rook a1, but now here comes the king. King g4, king d3, and after this pawn is just about to drop off the board, white throws it, there's nothing else to do anymore, the bishop captures, king comes to here, but after b4 the whole thing is hopeless. Rook c1 is tried, but now the bishop retreats, it doesn't want to let itself get taken, let the pawn go through. King f6, and now b3, rook c8, and a1 queen was the end of the game. Here Awonder Liang resigned, because the king is in check, and then the queen is about to take this pawn. Now the king can't step here, the bishop covers, and if it steps to g6 to stay with the pawn, well then you can simply check, and you're actually picking up the rook on the next move. It's mate in 6, the computer is telling me. And this game meant that the match was won by the Canada Chess Bras by just 1 point. So what a big swing of a game, real clutch moment. Magnus Carlsen does it again, the true Magnus effect. If you want to see another one of his exceptional games, then check out the video on screen.